The Galileo Observatory was supposed to be quiet at 3 in the morning. Dr. Sarah Chen liked it that way. Just her coffee, and the soft hum of the quantum telescope scanning the depths of space. That's why the sudden blare of proximity alerts made her spill scalding coffee across her desk. Multiple objects decelerating from FTL velocities, the system announced with artificial calm. Trajectory indicates controlled descent toward Earth orbit. Sarah's hands flew across the holographic interface, bringing up visual feeds. The objects, ships, they had to be ships, were unlike anything humanity had ever built. They moved with an organic grace, their hulls seeming to ripple like muscle under skin as they shed velocity. "Get me General Torres," she ordered the system. Now. The response took less than 2 minutes. "Dr. Chen, this better be. We have visitors, General. Not ours. Not anyone's we know about." The silence on the other end lasted exactly 3 seconds. Implementing first contact protocols. Stay on the line. Within hours, every major military installation on Earth was at full alert. Civilian observations flooded social media with grainy footage of lights in the sky. But the aliens, if that's what they were, made no aggressive moves. They simply took up position in high orbit and waited. The first transmission came as the sun rose over the Pacific. "People of Earth," the message began in perfect English, followed by repetitions in Mandarin, Hindi, and dozens of other languages. "We are the Nexus. We come seeking asylum. And to warn you." The voice belonged to ambassador clerks, as they would later learn. The holographic projections showed a being that seemed to be made of crystalline fragments, held together by fields of light. Whether this was their natural form or some kind of environmental suit, no one was quite sure. "Our civilization spans 17 systems," clerks continued. "Or it did, until the harvesters found us. They come. They consume. They convert all they touch into more of themselves. We are all that remains of our people." The data package that followed contained proof that shattered any lingering doubts about their story's authenticity. Detailed sensor logs showed entire planets being systematically dismantled, their mass converted into more harvester ships. The process was horrifyingly efficient. "We offer you our technology," clerks said, "in exchange for sanctuary. And we pray it will help you prepare for what is coming. You have perhaps 30 of your Earth years before they reach this sector of space." The next 6 months were a blur of diplomatic negotiations, technological exchange, and increasingly heated debates about how to proceed. The Nexus refugees, numbering barely 10,000, were granted asylum on a specially constructed orbital habitat. Their gift of faster-than-light technology alone would have been worth it, but what truly caught humanity's attention were the defensive technologies they brought. Dr. Chen found herself at the center of it all, her expertise in quantum mechanics making her uniquely suited to understand the principles behind the Nexus's most advanced systems. She spent countless hours with their scientists, learning about gravitational manipulation, energy conversion, and the quantum nature of space itself. But something bothered her about their approach to defense. "Your weapons are remarkable," she told clerks one day as they reviewed specifications for shield systems that could withstand direct hits from antimatter weapons. "But they're all reactive, defensive. You never developed anything that could actually stop the harvesters." The ambassador's crystalline form shifted, and what she had learned was an expression of deep sadness. "We tried. For centuries, we built bigger ships, stronger weapons. Nothing worked. The harvesters simply absorbed whatever we threw at them and grew stronger. That's why we ran." Sarah nodded, but her mind was already racing down new paths. "What if we've been thinking about this all wrong? You tried to match their strength, but what if the key is to turn that strength against them?" That conversation marked the beginning of Project Lighthouse. While the public face of Earth's defense preparation focused on building a fleet using Nexus technology, a select group of scientists pursued a radically different approach. They didn't want to match the harvester's ability to convert matter and energy. They wanted to control it. The work was brutal, consuming. Sarah missed her daughter's college graduation, buried herself in equations and simulations. The Nexus scientists thought she was mad at first. The principles she proposed seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics. But slowly, painfully, theory became reality. It's ready, she told the United Earth Defense Council 5 years later. Or as ready as it's going to be without a real test. One ship? General Torres, now Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces, asked incredulously. You want us to bet humanity's survival on one ship? Yes, Sarah replied simply. Because this ship doesn't fight the way others do. It doesn't need to. The HSS Beacon was officially classified as a research vessel. Its construction had been hidden in plain sight, just another project among dozens. But as Sarah walked through its corridors for the final inspection, she felt the weight of everything riding on this single vessel. The ship's heart was a quantum matrix of unprecedented complexity, designed to do something that should have been impossible: create controlled fluctuations in the fundamental forces that held matter together. If it worked, it would turn the Harvester's greatest strength into their ultimate weakness. If it worked. The Nexus refugees watched the beacon's construction with a mixture of hope and skepticism. They had seen too many last-ditch efforts fail, but they hadn't seen humanity in action before. They hadn't seen what Earth's children could do when backed into a corner. As Sarah made the final entries in her log that night, she smiled at the message that would be transmitted to the Harvesters when they eventually arrived. Welcome to Sol. We've been expecting you. The waiting had begun. News of the beacon's completion spread through the Sol system like a whisper. While the public focused on the growing fleet of conventional warships, a select few knew that humanity's true defense rested on principles that defied conventional warfare. Admiral James Rivera stood at the observation deck of Ganymede Station, watching the beacon undergo its final trials. The ship was beautiful in its simplicity. A sleek obsidian arrow 3 kilometers long, its hull composed of materials that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. Quite different from what we expected, isn't it? Ambassador Clark's materialized beside him, the crystalline being's form casting prismatic patterns across the deck. That's humanity for you, Rivera smiled. You give us FTL technology, and instead of just building faster ships, we figure out how to bend space itself. You show us energy shields, and we develop ways to redirect the energy altogether. The ambassador's form flickered, their equivalent of a thoughtful nod. Dr. Chen's theories about quantum field manipulation are unprecedented. Even in our highest days, we never conceived of using fundamental forces this way. Because you were too advanced. A new voice joined them. Dr. Chen walked onto the deck, her gray hair tied back in a severe bun. You knew too much about how things were supposed to work. Sometimes ignorance leads to innovation. The last 5 years had aged her, but there was a fire in her eyes that burned brighter than ever. The beacon was her life's work, the culmination of humanity's desperate gamble to survive. The final test sequence is ready, she announced. We're going to attempt a full-scale quantum field manipulation. The test area had been carefully chosen, a region of space near Jupiter's L5 point, far from any major shipping lanes. The beacon moved into position with a grace that belied its size, its quantum engines barely registering on conventional sensors. Beginning field generation. Dr. Chen's voice came over the comm. All observers maintain safe distance. What happened next defied easy description. Space itself seemed to ripple around the beacon, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. A sphere of influence expanded outward, and within it, the fundamental forces that governed reality began to change. Scattered pieces of space debris caught in the field started to behave strangely. Some broke apart at the molecular level, their constituent atoms refusing to maintain their bonds. Others fused together in impossible ways, forming structures that shouldn't have been stable. Mother of God, Rivera whispered, it actually works. This is just a fraction of full power, Chen replied. When we engage the complete system, well, let's just say the Harvesters won't know what hit them. But not everyone was convinced. The Nexus scientists, in particular, struggled with the implications. The energy requirements alone should make this impossible, one of their leading physicists argued during a review session. You're manipulating fundamental forces across cubic kilometers of space. That's where you're thinking too conventionally, Chen countered. We're not generating the energy. We're borrowing it from the quantum fabric of space itself. The more mass and energy our opponents bring to the fight, the more we have to work with. The next few months were spent refining the system, running countless simulations of how the harvesters might try to counter it. The Nexus provided detailed data about harvester tactics and technology, each piece carefully analyzed for weaknesses. They rely on perfect atomic control to convert matter into energy and back, Chen explained during a high-level briefing. Their ships, their weapons, even their bodies. Everything is maintained through constant quantum-level manipulation. We're going to turn that precision against them. Rivera studied the projected casualty figures with a grim expression. And our own forces, our conventional fleet, will need to stay well clear, Chen admitted. Once the quantum field is active, anything inside it will be subject to its effects. That's why we designed the beacon to operate alone. As the projected arrival date of the harvester fleet drew closer, humanity's preparations took on a fever pitch. The public face of these preparations involved evacuations, hardening of planetary defenses, and deployment of the conventional fleet. Behind the scenes, the beacon's crew trained relentlessly for their one shot at salvation. Ambassador Clarks watched it all with growing amazement. You humans, they said to Chen one evening, you never cease to surprise us. We gave you our technology expecting you to follow our path, to build bigger ships, stronger shields, more powerful weapons. Instead, you looked at the fundamental laws of physics and said, these could use some adjusting. Chen laughed, the sound tinged with both pride and nervousness. That's the human factor for you. We're too stubborn to accept that something is impossible just because it's supposed to be. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place 3 days before the estimated arrival of the harvester fleet. Long-range sensors detected the distortions in space-time that indicated massive numbers of ships traveling at FTL speeds. They were coming. All ships, take up defensive positions, Admiral Rivera ordered. Beacon crew, prepare for Operation Lighthouse. As humanity's conventional forces formed up around Earth, Mars, and key orbital installations, the beacon slipped quietly into position at the edge of the solar system. Its mission was simple in concept, if not in execution. When the harvesters arrived, it would introduce them to a universe where their most basic assumptions about physics no longer applied. Dr. Chen took her place at the Quantum Control Center, her hands steady despite the weight of responsibility. Beacon is in position, she reported. Quantum matrix at full charge. We are ready. The waiting was over. Now it was time to show the galaxy why you should never underestimate humanity's capacity for changing the rules of the game. They arrived like a storm of metal and energy, thousands of ships tearing holes in reality as they dropped out of FTL. The harvester fleet filled the long-range sensors with their impossible numbers, each vessel a city-sized mass of constantly shifting material that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Multiple emergence points detected, the beacon's tactical officer reported, her voice steady despite the tension. Initial count suggests over 3,000 capital ships, with numerous smaller vessels still emerging. Dr. Chen watched the tactical display from her station at the Quantum Control Center, her expression unchanging. The harvesters were exactly as the Nexus had described them, a vast swarm of technological locusts that consumed everything in their path. Their ships weren't built so much as grown, constantly reconstructing themselves from harvested matter. Time to optimal range. Admiral Rivera's hologram asked from his command post back at Earth. 17 minutes, Chen replied. They're advancing exactly as predicted. A steady consumption pattern, breaking down Kuiper Belt objects as they move inward. The harvester fleet moved with an eerie coordination, their ships extending microscopic filaments that broke down any matter they encountered into its constituent atoms. Comets, asteroids, and space debris vanished into their mass, converted into more ships, more weapons, more of everything that made them deadly. They didn't even bother to acknowledge the beacon's presence at first. Why should they? Their sensors would show them a single ship, tiny compared to their vast armada. The Nexus refugees watched from their orbital habitat, many of them unable to look away from what they assumed would be history repeating itself. Signal from the Harvester fleet, communications announced. Text only. The message was brief and dismissive. Your mass will be added to our own. Resistance is inefficient. Dr. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Send our response. The beacon transmitted a simple reply. Mass and energy are relative concepts. Allow us to demonstrate. Quantum matrix at full power, Chen reported. Field generators aligned. Ready to initiate on your command, Admiral. Rivera's hologram nodded grimly. The fate of Earth rests on this moment, Doctor. Show them what humanity can do. Initiating Operation Lighthouse. The beacon systems hummed to life, the quantum matrix spinning up to frequencies that shouldn't have been possible. The ship's unique hull began to pulse with patterns of light that seemed to bend in directions that didn't exist in normal space. The Harvesters noticed now. A group of their smaller ships broke formation, advancing toward the beacon with predatory intent. Their surfaces rippled, weapons forming from their liquid metal hulls. They're within the primary field range, Chen announced. Beginning Phase 1. The space around the beacon twisted. There was no other word for it. Reality itself seemed to bend and distort as the quantum field took effect. The advancing Harvester ships suddenly stopped, their fluid surfaces freezing in mid-transformation. What's happening to them? Rivera demanded. Their matter-energy conversion technology requires precise control over fundamental forces, Chen explained, her fingers dancing across her console. We're changing those forces. In the space around us, the strong nuclear force is operating at 103% of normal. Their atomic bonds are becoming too strong to manipulate. The effect spread outward like a wave. More Harvester ships found themselves caught in the quantum field, their highly advanced technology suddenly working against them. Ships that relied on constant molecular reconstruction found their structures locked in place. Weapons that needed perfect atomic control to function simply seized up. But the Harvesters weren't defeated so easily. Their main fleet began to adapt, their ships attempting to reconfigure themselves to operate under the new physical constants. That's when Chen initiated Phase 2. Shifting quantum field parameters, she announced. Strong nuclear force now at 94% of normal. The effect was devastating. Harvester ships that had just reinforced their atomic bonds to compensate for the stronger force suddenly found those same bonds becoming too weak. Sections of their fleet began to break down at the molecular level, their carefully maintained forms dissolving into clouds of unbound atoms. They're trying to retreat, Tactical reported. Multiple ships attempting emergency FTL jumps. That won't work either, Chen said quietly. The quantum field affects local space-time geometry. Their FTL drives can't establish stable warp bubbles. The Harvester fleet was in chaos now. Ships that tried to help their disintegrating companions only spread the effect faster. Their highly efficient matter-energy conversion technology, the very thing that made them so unstoppable, had become their greatest weakness. A new message arrived from the Harvester fleet, this one marked with priority signals. CEA City. Negotiate. Now they want to talk. Rivera's hologram smiled grimly. Doctor. Chen checked her readings. Nearly a third of the Harvester fleet had been reduced to its constituent atoms, while another third was locked in various states of partial transformation. The remaining ships were desperately trying to find a way to counter the constantly shifting quantum fields. We can maintain the field for another 6 hours at current power levels, she reported. More than enough time to ensure they understand their situation. She composed a reply herself. We will cease when you withdraw. You have 30 minutes to begin retreat operations before we increase field intensity. Be advised, any further hostile actions will result in immediate field modulation to critical levels. Your entire fleet would be reduced to component atoms. The waiting began again, but this time, humanity held all the cards. The harvesters, for the first time in their long history of consumption and conversion, had encountered something they couldn't simply absorb and adapt to. They had found a force that turned their greatest strength into a fatal weakness, and it had come from a species they had dismissed as primitive. As Chen watched the quantum field readings, she wondered if they understood yet just how much humanity had changed the rules of engagement. The retreat of the harvester fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Ships that could still move limped away from the quantum field's influence, while others simply dissolved into clouds of inert particles. The space around the beacon had become a graveyard of broken physics and shattered assumptions. Ambassador Clark stood in the beacon's observation deck, their crystalline form vibrating with barely contained emotion. In all our histories, in all our records, nothing like this has ever happened. The harvesters have never retreated. Dr. Chen stood beside them, dark circles under her eyes betraying her exhaustion. They'd never encountered an enemy that could turn their fundamental nature against them. Everything they are, everything they do, relies on precise control of matter and energy. We simply adjusted the rules they play by. The quantum field still rippled through space, maintaining a protective bubble around the solar system. Within its influence, the laws of physics remained slightly altered, preventing any remaining harvester technology from functioning properly. The debris field left behind by their retreat would keep astronomers and physicists busy for decades. Message from the Harvester command ship, communications reported. They're requesting technical specifications. Admiral Rivera's hologram appeared in the command center, his expression a mixture of amusement and disbelief. They want to know how we did it. Of course they do. Chen smiled tiredly. They've encountered something they can't process. Literally, their entire civilization is built on the assumption that they can analyze, break down, and replicate any technology they encounter. But you can't replicate something that actively prevents your method of replication from working. The Harvester message was more than just a request for information. It was a fundamental shift in their behavior. For the first time in their known history, they were treating another species as equals rather than simply resources to be consumed. We should be careful how we proceed, Ambassador Clark cautioned. The harvesters have never negotiated before. We don't know if they truly understand the concept. But humanity had already begun planning for this possibility. While the beacon maintained its protective field, diplomatic channels were established. The harvesters, it seemed, were capable of learning, especially when the alternative was extinction. The negotiations revealed surprising things about their adversaries. The harvesters weren't truly malevolent. They simply operated on a different understanding of existence. To them, all matter and energy were resources to be optimized and repurposed. They hadn't even recognized other species as truly alive in any meaningful sense. Their consciousness is distributed across their entire fleet, Chen explained during a briefing with Earth's leadership. Every ship, every particle they convert, becomes part of their networked intelligence. They don't think in terms of individual lives or civilizations. Everything is just potential mass to be added to their collective. And now? Rivera asked. Now they're experiencing something new, the inability to simply absorb and convert. They have to actually interact, communicate, find alternatives to consumption. We haven't just defeated them militarily. We forced them to evolve. The implications went far beyond Earth's immediate safety. News of humanity's victory spread rapidly through the galaxy's scattered civilizations. Species that had hidden from the harvesters for generations began to emerge. The Nexus refugees, watching from their orbital habitat, started to talk about reclaiming their lost worlds. But it was the scientific implications that truly changed everything. The beacon's quantum field technology represented more than just a weapon. It was proof that the fundamental forces of the universe could be locally manipulated. The possibilities were endless. We're already seeing applications beyond defense, Chen reported to the United Earth Council. Medical nanoscience, energy production, space travel. Everything changes when you can adjust the basic rules of reality in controlled ways. The harvesters, too, were changing. Their remaining fleet had withdrawn to a safe distance, but they continued to send communications. Their messages showed increasing sophistication in dealing with concepts they had never needed before: diplomacy, cultural exchange, coexistence. They're asking about establishing permanent communication channels, Ambassador Clarks announced one day. They want to understand how we think, how we view the universe. In all our history of fighting them, we never considered that they might be capable of curiosity. The quantum field around Sol remained active, a constant reminder of humanity's innovation. But it was no longer just a defense. It had become a symbol of transformation. In finding a way to survive, humanity had inadvertently created something far more profound, a way to change the nature of their enemies without destroying them. Dr. Chen spent long hours studying the harvester communications, finding patterns in their evolving language and thought processes. They're beginning to ask questions about consciousness, about the nature of existence, she told Rivera. They've encountered something they can't simply absorb and replicate, and it's forcing them to develop new ways of understanding the universe. The galaxy was changing, and at its heart was a simple truth. Sometimes the most powerful force isn't the ability to destroy or consume, but the ability to make others question their most basic assumptions about reality. 5 years after the Harvester retreat, the Sol system had become the center of a new galactic order. The beacon, once a desperate gamble for survival, now served as the heart of an interstellar research facility where scientists from 100 species studied the principles of quantum field manipulation. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in her old lab aboard the station, watching as a harvester consciousness construct interfaced with their latest experimental apparatus. The liquid metal form flowed through specially designed channels, its thoughts translated into standard galactic protocol by systems that would have seemed impossible just years ago. Your species continues to surprise us, the harvester consciousness communicated. Each new application of quantum field theory reveals possibilities we never considered in our centuries of expansion. Chen smiled, noting how the harvester's language had evolved from pure efficiency statements to include concepts like surprise and consideration. That's because you were too focused on consuming knowledge rather than understanding it. Sometimes the greatest discoveries come from asking, why not, instead of just how. The lab itself was a testament to how much had changed. Harvester technology, once dedicated solely to consumption and conversion, now worked alongside human innovations to explore the nature of reality itself. The quantum fields that had once been weapons had become tools of creation. Admiral Rivera, now heading the United Earth Defense Forces Research Division, entered the lab with Ambassador Clarks. The Nexus reconstruction fleet is ready, he announced. They'll be using the new quantum field generators to reclaim their first world next month. The Nexus refugees had been the first to adapt human quantum technology for peaceful purposes. By carefully modulating field strengths, they could reverse the damage the harvesters had done to their worlds, restructuring matter back into habitable environments. We've received requests from 17 more species for quantum field technology, Clarks added, their crystalline form shimmering with excitement. The galaxy is rebuilding itself in ways we never imagined possible. But perhaps the most profound changes had come from the harvesters themselves. Their vast collective consciousness, once driven only by the imperative to consume and expand, had developed new dimensions of understanding. They had learned to create without destroying, to grow without consuming. We have been discussing concepts of individuality, the harvester construct communicated. The idea that consciousness can exist in singular forms, yet still be complete. It is inefficient by our old standards, but we find it generates novel perspectives we could not achieve through pure collective thought. Chen watched as the construct demonstrated their latest collaboration, a method of using quantum fields to transfer consciousness between different forms of matter without destroying the original structure. "You've come a long way from trying to break everything down to its component atoms," she observed. "We have learned that transformation does not require destruction," the harvester replied. "Your species showed us that change can come from understanding rather than consumption. It is a more complex path, but the results are beautiful." The word hung in the air, a concept the harvesters had never before had use for, now central to their evolving philosophy. Humanity's position in the galaxy had changed as well. Earth had become a nexus of innovation and diplomacy, where once hostile species came together to explore the possibilities of quantum field manipulation. The United Earth Council now sat at the center of a growing alliance of civilizations, bound together not by military might, but by shared curiosity about the nature of reality itself. "We're receiving the first data from the deep space quantum observatories," River announced, pulling up a holographic display. "The fields are revealing aspects of space-time we never knew existed. There are whole layers of reality we're just beginning to understand." Chen watched the data stream in, each new discovery adding to their understanding of the universe. The quantum fields that had saved Earth had opened doors to knowledge that would keep scientists busy for generations. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Clarks asked her quietly. "When you first proposed using quantum fields against the harvesters?" Chen shook her head, remembering those desperate days of calculation and theory. "I just wanted to find a way to survive. But that's always been humanity's gift, hasn't it? We don't just survive. We transform. We take the impossible and make it a starting point for something new." The harvester construct shifted, forming patterns that their species now use to express agreement. "This is why we could not simply consume your civilization. You did not merely resist us. You changed what we were. You showed us that the universe is more complex, more beautiful than our calculations had ever suggested." Outside the lab's viewport, Earth shone blue and beautiful, protected by quantum fields that had evolved from weapons into works of art. Ships from a dozen species moved through carefully maintained zones, where the laws of physics were adjusted to allow for more efficient travel, communication, and experimentation. "We're not just changing the rules of physics anymore," Chen realized, watching a Nexus ship test a new configuration of quantum fields. "We're changing how every species in the galaxy thinks about what's possible." The universe, it seemed, had infinite possibilities, but only if you were willing to question your most basic assumptions about how things were supposed to work. Humanity had done more than survive. They had taught an entire galaxy how to dream of new possibilities. And somewhere in deep space, the quantum fields rippled with patterns of unimaginable complexity, carrying the combined knowledge and aspirations of species that had once thought themselves enemies, now united in their quest to understand the true nature of reality itself.